Hello, it's me, Rohin, and I'm back with part 2 of our final Supercut, where we spliced together one interesting bit of conversation from the last 21 guests that I've interviewed on First Principles. And like the first episode, where we covered founders 1 to 20, you'll hear super sharp slices of a few minutes each, which are reflections on their approach to organization building, risk taking, decision making, and life living. Here are the guests you'll listen to on this episode. Krish Subramanian, co-founder and CEO of Chargebee. Varun, founder of Acko. Yashish Dahiya, co-founder and group CEO of Policybazaar. Archit Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Clear. Srinivasu, co-founder and director of Billdesk. Radhika Gupta, MD and CEO of Edelweiss Asset Management. Lalit Keshre, co-founder and CEO of Groww. Niraj Singh, founder and CEO of Spinny. Karthik Jayaraman, managing director of Waycool. Ritesh Agarwal, founder and CEO of Oyo. Soumya Rajan, founder and CEO of Waterfield Advisors. Viren Shetty, executive vice chairman of Narayana Health. Anish Reddy, founder and MD of Capillary Technologies. Vaibhav Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Udan. Girish Matsubootham, founder and executive chairman of Freshworks. Harsh Mariwala, chairman of Marico. Chetan Mani, co-founder and chairman of Sun Mobility. Jaydeep Burman, co-founder and CEO of Rebel Foods. Alok Mittal, co-founder and MD of Indifi Technologies. Kapil Chopra, founder of the Postcard Hotels. And Manav Garg, founder of Acko. This is not the end of the road for me as a podcast host, as you'll soon find out. Actually, very soon. I'll be back. What advice would you give people graduating around these times or young potential founders or developers based on how you see your own, the first 10 years of your career, passing out without a job, spending 10 years in large organizations like TCS and Cognizant, then finally getting to start? How do you view this with the benefit of hindsight?
One thing, I think if I have to give ourselves some credit in certain areas, one is we kept the dream alive without drawing boundaries through the limit, sometimes not knowing your limitations, constraints, that you are in a different part of the world, or you don't see many such examples of a thriving ecosystem, any of that. I think ignoring all that in some ways and just looking at the dream and possibilities is that naivety is very good. Preserving it, I think, has been super important, right? Just dreaming. Second is I did not fall into the trap or habit of actually spending more than I had to a large degree. From even in 2005, Raman reinforced a conversation that we had as an email to a bunch of friends saying, okay, here is the plan to make sure that you have built your nest egg so you can actually start a company. To a bunch of us classmates. Actually, only the two of us ended up starting the company. A couple of them actually ended up investing in the company, because the pact we had as classmates was, some of us was to say, whoever is actually available to start the company, come and join the company, start the company. Otherwise, others need to put money. Right? That was some kind of a conversation, and every few months we used to catch up. So being very disciplined in saving our salary from the beginning has been super helpful. My second, I mentioned that my first salary was 3,500 rupees, right? But the TCS one straight away was 17,000 rupees within the first year. For me, that felt and I had moved back from Bangalore to Chennai, back home. I didn't know how to actually spend that money. And thankfully, I could just save so much more. And I pretty much all my requirements I built around saving. So I have built the habit of signing off on all the savings, 1/3 of my salary, into systematic investment plan, mutual PF, the provident fund, and everything else. And only whatever I get is how I used to design my life or plan my spend. And it's not that I'm a meticulous financial planner, right? Till date, I've not planned or even declared my tax thing to save on the 1.5 lakhs ATC or whatever that government provides. Like for most of my years, I missed it, even the basic tax planning. And yet, what helped was just not expanding your wants as needs has been a very helpful framework. Raman was also same way, right? Thankfully my two other co-founders.
How did were they also your classmates?
No, I knew them through Zoho connection, like him through Raman. So KPS, our current co-founder and CTO, was his tech mentor, right? And when Raman was trying to quit, he was trying to convince him to stay at Zoho or start up with him. The reverse happened. Then Thiago was his roommate and he had been staying with him for quite some time. And I knew him through that. And he knew that because we were just talking, he was like, okay, it looks like the two of you are discussing all the time. Looks like you guys are starting up. If we are starting up, I'm in. That's it.
It would be remiss to say that the role that FOMO plays in the early stages, because you did say that one of the things for you was that what if Raman decides to start something else? Yeah. And then you don't want to be, right? Exactly. And, you just mentioned another co-founders, like you guys are doing something, I want to be in. Yeah. Right? Like, but it's one of the forcing functions that sometimes, because like you said, you got it. Sorry?
Same for VCs.
Absolutely, right? Like, yeah, you're right. What is it that you think that the four co-founders like bring, which is complementary?
So even though a lot of ways we are similar, I think we are also very, very different people. Meaning, I'll talk a little bit about my co-founders, right? So Thiago is technical architect, right? And every one of us through a 10-12 year journey generally have our own ups and downs in Mojo, how we actually latch onto things, and in the scaling journey of company, finding our own identity and all of that happens, right? And a very tech person still does not have any direct reports, right? And deliberately calls himself technical architect, and that's it, right? Doesn't want any other title. KPS CTO used to be someone who used to, like, for 6 hours he can just zone out and then just code. Very different caliber of that engineer, where without headphone he can stare at you, you keep talking, and then he'll be looking at you blankly, and after some time he will just wave in front of your face saying, okay, sorry, I'm not able to hear you, because he's always still thinking about that stuff, right? So very different type of engineer. Whereas Raman and I are very similar in many ways, where we are more people oriented. We actually take a joy in developing people, and we realize that through the journey we get a lot more joy unlocking and helping people, unblocking people, more than our own role, set in our own roles to say, this is what I want to do.
What motivates and drives you on a daily basis?
I have frankly no idea. I can tell you that I was super lazy. I didn't try to excel at school. I didn't try to get into the IITs or Stanford or what. I knew I was not dumb, but I was very, very lazy. My friends would call me lazy. Like I wouldn't try to ace my assignment or...
You were not driven as a student?
Not at all.
What about today?
Not
How
at all.
driven are you?
I'm very driven, and I don't know why. I don't know. I think I started figuring out this trait in me that I could potentially is when I could make an impact in the real world. When I was working in my first job and I could change things. I set up something which became successful, a small unit. It just gave me like, a kick. Like, hey, I can make shit happen, And I think that's addictive, at least to me. I'm not saying it is to everyone. So, and it just became purposeful. So now I can, if I'm traveling, my dots connect. Hey, I can connect this thing to insurance, or I can connect. It's just your mind's working all the time. But I haven't come across any spiritual, deep motivation. It just happened along the way.
Since you mentioned spiritual, do you meditate?
Not much. I try to get enough of a workout in a couple of times a week. To me, that's just by myself, my calm space. But it's not like I sit down and meditate. Yeah.
How do you define success today versus maybe 10 years ago?
I think 10 years ago, to be honest, I just wanted to make a company and make money, if I can be honest. I wasn't deeply attached to... I think as you grow a little older, and as you realize that what you're doing you actually, I would genuinely say you forget about the money. You just completely, it sounds like cliche or sounds not genuine, if I can put it that way. But yeah, you just completely forget about the money. It just becomes so deeply ingrained with your identity, with what you do, how you think. Your life revolves around you. Your life revolves around this, that success just starts meaning something different.
So
let
me hold you to that, which is like often like, when people are young, it's like, I wish I had $1 million.
Yeah.
I wish I was like what's that for you right now? What's your most ambitious
To
success
me,
definition?
to me, I want to, let me put it, I'll say two things. I want Acko to be a public company. I want Acko to last beyond me, and not be a sellout situation. I think financial services companies like HDFC or ICICI or even Kotak, first gen, right? Kotak they can be massive and they can be large institutions. I'd love to build an institution like that in India. That maybe I have to hang my boots 5-10 years from now or whatever it is. Or maybe I'm not the right guy to run it. But I think we are in a place where at least Acko's business model, the space that it is in, I think it has a shot at it. To me, that will be success. That it lasts beyond me. It's not some company that has to be saved because it continues to burn money and you need to find a buyer. I think that will be very, very important to me. Second, I am I would like people who work in Acko to say good things about Acko when they leave. I think that's important to me. People will leave. They will have different career aspirations. They'll fulfill a part of their career in Acko. There'll be some who've been there pre-inception. They're still there, 6 years, 7 years. I think they'll do 10, 15 years also with Acko. Some will learn a lot. We will learn from them, the 4, 5, 3 years that they give, and they'll move on. But I think it's important to me, maybe I'm vain or whatever it is, I don't know. I want people to say, hey, I learned, it was a good place. I think that's important to me. When we've had a disgruntled employee leaving and saying, it hurts me that they said Acko is a shitty place. Something went wrong with them. Maybe things didn't align. But I would not like to be remembered as a company which treats its people very well. I think that's important to me. Yeah.
In many ways, what you're saying are all aligned. If it's an institution that is around 20 years from now, 25 years from now, chances are it needs to be an institution which is able to retain people, grow people, etc., and all of that.
Yeah, and we are we're very proud of that. We've had most of our initial people are still there. Most of them, I would say 80% of them are still there. Some who come in, don't align, and then leave quickly. That has also happened. But yeah, I'm quite proud of the fact that those people continue to believe in Acko and continue to believe in where we're going.
I mean, that aligns with Policybazaar and its job of trying to detect who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, so as a leader, do you have any tips on how you identify and groom potential leaders? You spoke about future potential.
Same thing here. I like to see truthfulness. I like to see. So the one trait that we classify in Policybazaar is an iota of selflessness. And both those words are very carefully used. We don't expect you to be selfless all the time. You have to be selfish to survive also and to succeed. And I want people to be smart and selfish also. But at times, you shouldn't be a person who doesn't have the ability to be selfless. And I just don't have the ability at all. I can only think myself. There's some people who will create a 100 rupee loss for the company for 1 rupee of their own benefit. No, that is something we cannot have. And I know it sounds weird, but that happens all the time in the corporate world, right? And in any part of the world, right? So we spot that iota of selflessness somehow. And over a lifetime, you start developing a pattern of matching on that. When people come into the organization who don't match that profile, very quickly that gets like they stand out like a sore thumb in the organization. And the organization is very harsh on them very, very rapidly.
It's almost like a body turning on a foreign agent.
It's almost like HR doesn't need to get involved. Those people know they are outsiders here. and it gets caught up in everything. And we are extremely transparent as an organization, so people almost start calling it out. And these are seen in small things. Like, we don't have anything like what time you come into office, what time you don't. But on a day that there's a problem, and on the day when you also have a personal commitment, let's say, and depends, right? If your kid is unwell, that's a different issue. But if you're going to see a football match and you've bought a ticket for 50,000 rupees, let's just say, are you able to walk off from that ticket because you have something serious that you need to solve, right? We look for those kind of things. And we find them. And honestly, the 50,000 rupees doesn't matter in the long term. So we basically look for silly decision making that sometimes people do. And if you're a silly decision maker, you won't last at Policybazaar. It's very simple.
Why did you consider yourself a crappy leader earlier on?
I think, like, in hindsight, I know I was an
Of course.
leader, not in foresight.
No, but I think I'm talking about that self-awareness. Like,
Right.
what do you know now about the past you, which you now want to change?
Right. So one is like actively managing people's growth within Clear. I think we never thought about it, and so consequently then actions did not happen. Where I think there were a bunch of folks who've trusted us, and fortunately some of them have stuck around and they've grown with us. But there have been patches where we have not grown as a company, like due to whatever factors, like whether it was execution, macro, what have you. In those junctures, people can leave, and some people did leave, some people chose to stay. Now, the people who chose to stay despite like my sometimes misguided leadership and what have you. And I think over there now we are far more intentional.
So if I were kind of blunt, you're saying that they chose to stay despite you, not because of you. And the shift that you want to make now is to make sure that more people are staying.
So I'm
through
giving
the hard
myself
times
the
as well.
harshest score I can.
Of course, I think as CEOs, that's and founders especially, that's
So,
always you hold yourself up to the highest standard.
Yeah, so over here, I would say, like, we could have, like, when I look back, we could have done a much better job, like being intentional in giving people different roles, offering more of us to them, being more.
Can I ask you to be more specific? Because I mean, the original question was, what have you changed your mind about managing people? So
Right. So the big things is, I think a few things which come with scale, I don't worry about them too much. Like going from a 3 people company to a 800 people or at peak 1,000 people company, the organizing teams, setting up teams, I think over there it is all learned capabilities, learned skills. So I think over there I'm not too worried. I think we made the mistakes which all growth stage startups go through, not too bad. Like I think the part where intentional about these are our people, we have to focus on their careers, their success, figure out ways to grow them. And if they are bringing like the right, like if they're bringing the right attitude, how do we partner with them till it hurts? Mindset shift is what I'm talking about. Like I think that mindset shifted for me like about a few years ago, but I wish it had shifted very early on.
So is it, I'm still not sure that I fully understand, but are you essentially saying that you shouldn't leave the career growth of your best people only to them, but you need to have like a very strong plan yourself also to partner them and to give them a career? Is that what you're hinting at?
That's one part. I think that's not
Could you
like the,
then perhaps clarify?
Yeah, I think like a more recent example for, like, let me quantify it, right? Like a more recent example is we've, for 20 folks right now, we've invested in leadership coaching, for example, recently. Now, it's not functional. It's about them becoming more self-aware, them discovering their true strengths and doubling down on those strengths, and answering some very deep questions about themselves. So now this may seem very like...
Someone called it therapy for executive leaders.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned the senior management team, which in many organizations would also be called leadership team. I would like to understand how has the idea of a leadership team and the actual leadership team evolved at Billdesk from the time that you started. The original leadership team would have been the three of you, right? And today, that leadership team would be very different. But I'm sure it's gone through evolutions in your own minds, perhaps, of what is a leadership team, how big should it be, what should it do, etc.
So I've never been able to figure out if, the buzzwords of we pivoted, we evolved. To say we didn't pivot, we didn't evolve, whether good or bad signals, right? I will, that's only time to tell. I don't even kind of particularly believe anybody external can judge on those. But a couple of facts of Billdesk. When we started in 2000, beyond the philosophies we discussed, we also did one more thing. We said Billdesk would have no defined hierarchy for people in the traditional organization sense and no designations. 23 years later, we still stick to that. We have no designations. I mean, other than what is a regulator required to say a company secretary, CISO. I mean, those kind of asks apart.
So what are people called?
People are just called a member of a certain team. A appointment letter would say you're a member of a technology team, member of a business team, right? You could be a member of a team with a, let's say, a 1 crore salary. You could be the member of a team with a 5 lakh. Your appointment letter will not read different. Your designation will not read different. You could be sitting in the office next to a person who's 1/20th your salary or 20x your salary. There is no carved out places for people. They're fixed places to it. It's not we are saying it's a hotspot where anybody can sit. But there is genuinely no hierarchy in terms of saying people will sit here, they will have whatever.
But there must be a reporting hierarchy.
There is a working relationship. So I said, therefore, why did we start? That's one of the, obviously the joys of starting something, you can define your own rules. It came from two reasons. One, as I said, in times we were building and in the space we were building, there wasn't talent in the market. You had to build the talent. So the idea was when you're getting the first 10 people, you might have been, let us say, a banking relationship guy in a bank. The idea was to get you in, train you in the product we were building, and then figure out if your natural inclination was the client relationship handling the product or the business. So in the initial teams, that's how it started, saying, we're getting people. India had no definition of product at that point. See, technology was IT. In those days, just to use the word, you had IT and MIS teams. You didn't have a vertical called product. No bank had a team called payments. And you had relationship management people in the traditional sense within banks or other organizations. But that definition was more, of just purely managing relationships, right? We needed, in our context, the relationship manager being able to handle whether it was a GM in a bank or a officer, explain to them the product, be able to answer questions, like how does something work, be able to demo it, give them comfort, right? So we needed a more well-rounded, let's say, personality, which means the person had to have skills of product and little understanding of tech, a little understanding of the legal framework to the business offering. So that's how when we got our initial 10, 20 people, all were kind of groomed into all these roles.
Sort of like a general management program.
Effectively, right? But again, I said, we didn't distinguish between a 2-year profile or a 10-year profile. This is about, we said, and this is where we won in the initial years against our competition, right? Because I know I'm jumping topics a bit, but the difference between Billdesk and then that time competitors was a competitor would go make a pitch, let's say in a bank or a merchant with a certain thing. And the person would say, I need to know something more. And they would say, okay, we'll come back with 4 teams. Billdesk case, the person would say, tell me and I'll tell you the 4 things right across the table. We built a capability to a level, and we've done this, where you'd go for a meeting, start explaining the construct, but the person across the table had the ability to walk you through the product, the tech, through the agreement, and if you're okay, sign it there, right? To that level. So that's how we built it.
Let's switch lanes a bit and talk about careers. Again, some of the things that you said, I don't relate to the concept of work-life balance. I love my job.
Yeah.
I have the best job in the world. Now, all of these statements are today almost problematic
Yes.
for the younger generation, because how can you say you love your job? It's just a job. How can you say you have the best job in the world? How can you say you don't have work-life balance?
God, yeah. My God. I would be killed for some of these statements, man.
I want you to talk about your career ladder. How did you get here? How did you get to a place where you're comfortable and confident enough to know and to be able to say, I love my job. This is the best job in the world. I don't like work-life balance, because you're happy in what you do. What was your career ladder like that got you here? Could you take us back?
Yeah. So firstly, like many kids of my generation, I didn't grow up knowing what I want to do. In fact, I grew up in a background that was entirely civil services and government. So nobody had worked in corporate India. In fact, when I went to college and I went to Wharton Business School, etc., I was lucky enough to get financial help. Classmates of mine were like, I'm going to do consulting, I'm going to do investment banking. For me, I didn't know these things. This was all private sector for me. So the words in our house were, we knew about the difference between IAS and IFS and ICS and PCS, but we didn't know consulting versus banking versus tech. That's the background I came up with. So I had no plans. I was a good student who did business and engineering because that is what good students do. I mean, that is really it. So I just did it for that. And my initial 5-6 years of my career were at least 3-4 years of my career were a process of experimentation. I did tech for 2 years as an intern at Microsoft. I had a tech degree. Then I was like, this is too techy for me. So, like Goldilocks, I decided to do consulting. And I was at McKinsey for the analyst program. Then I was like, this is too high level for me. I want to
How long were you at McKinsey?
18 months,
Got it.
analyst program. So tech is too techy. This is too high level. Then someone gave me an opportunity in asset management, an alumni of the program I had worked at or I had gone to school at. And it was a role at a quant firm. So quant, the good thing was it combined some tech. So my tech engineering was not useless. And it had some business. So I said, okay, both my degrees are getting justice. Let me try this. That is how I landed in asset management. All this time, my parents had no clue. They were like, all 3 careers are paying you a lot of money. You're earning more than your father is earning at the peak of his career. So that was my kind of experimentation. I've been in asset management since then. So I've been an asset management professional. So in the first 2-3 years of flitting around, after that, I've been an asset management professional. I did 3-4 years at my hedge fund in the US. I saw 2008, got promoted, and then in 2009, decided to come back to India. I promise you on a lark. In retrospect, it's probably
Were you married then?
I was married. I was married a year ago.
I only asked this because you
my
were
husband was a
LM.
co-founder, yeah. So we decided to come back with a third co-founder. Completely on a lark. I have never lived in India because my father was a diplomat. My husband had lived in India. The other co-founder had lived in India. Neither of us had worked in India.
What was the trigger?
See, there were subconscious triggers. If you look at an Indian's perspective abroad, between 2003 and 2007, India had this tremendous bull market. BRICS was being talked about. I feel it was the time India was emerging in some way. The other thought was that, you can't start a financial services business as a foreign national in the US. It's a very over-penetrated market in India. So it was literally like, chalo aake India kuch karte hain. That's how we did it. And you also have a little bit of arrogance of youth that I am doing something in the US that doesn't exist in India. I have all these big ideas. I have these great credentials. People will give me money. That was the trigger for which I moved
So the
back.
trigger was to come back to India and start something on your own.
Yes.
That was Forefront Capital.
That was Forefront Capital. And that
what was
2000
Forefront Capital?
So Forefront Capital wanted to do non-traditional investing. It started out as a quant investing boutique. I think it was about 10 years ahead of its time. And started out on the license called the PMS license, which is a high net worth investment license. Incidentally, karma is a funny thing. When I was looking at SEBI regulations then, I wanted to be a mutual fund because even then we were like, God, it's all mutual fund. Then we saw the net worth and capital requirements for mutual funds and decided, okay, this is not doable. we'll do a PMS. So in some way, I joke, I've been wanting to run a mutual fund since 2009. I got the chance to do it in 17.
Again, like, you've said in the past that when, you and your co-founders went to investors, many of them laughed at your idea of the product. Why was that? Like, it looks like financial services, was it because it was too crowded? Was it because they couldn't make sense of what your vision was? And I think the corollary that you said is, therefore, it's super important to know what your customers want. So what did you know that, the VCs were unable to see?
No, I think, see, it's not their fault. It's like they had seen a lot of, and it happened in the previous startup also, they have seen a lot of failures in this space, right? So when I was at Flipkart and I was doing research of mutual fund apps, there were like 40 apps I counted. I shared with my team also, 40. And some of them were funded as well, right? So we were like, अब just imagine कि 40 apps देख चुका हूँ मैं, and then 41st is coming. Decent team, अच्छा Flipkart में काम किया है, थोड़ा 4 लड़के हैं, they are good and so on. But why 41st will work and why 40 startups will not work and so on, right? So that's how I think we will see. What was contrarian was the thesis of delayed monetization, like, that another contrarian was that this product is very high retention product. Again, coming from like have been building consumer products. So in consumer product, again, low CAC, high retention, high engagement, customer love. If these 4 things are taken care of, the probability of monetization is very high. It's just that delayed. But these 4 are very important. If you're high CAC and you say, I will do delayed monetization, sorry. If you have very low engagement or low in retention and you say delayed monetization, does not work out because you're building a leaky bucket. Or if your customers don't love you, right? Or if your operation costs are very high, that does not work, right? And typically when you raise money, you want to spend. And we were like, money was always in the bank. We never spend money.
I want to stick with clarity itself, and it's something that you believe in deeply. You say that you try and ensure there is clarity from top to bottom in the company. How do you ensure this? I mean, how do you ensure?
Communication and right precedences, transparency, authenticity.
What do you mean by communication? Because it's a very generic word. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
you engage people, you keep everybody informed, right? And you encourage questions, you encourage feedback, and be transparent. Don't try to manage people, right? Everybody is smart enough, everybody is capable enough. So just in it.
So, I asked you a question earlier when we were talking about your 3 Ks. And you said that don't just chase a large market, right? When someone comes to you, say in a meeting and say, look, I want to launch
that
this
keeps
new
happening.
category, and like, this is a very attractive underserved market and so what are you likely to kind of like, counter back and ask them?
What's broken there? And what's your solution, right? What's our value add going to be?
What's
ठीक है, बड़ी opportunity है, and we are not sure what exact value we are going to add, then better not doing it. We should be very clear that what exact value we are going to bring to the table.
You also said, in the past and of course in our conversation, that trust is very important for the customer. Very interestingly, you said that for the customer to have trust, it's important that trust exists at all levels in the organization.
Yeah.
How did you come to this realization, and how do you make sure this happens at Spinny? And let me step back and ask why. Why is it that for a customer to get trust, because as a layperson, it's like for a customer who's, let's say, buying a car and the service experience having trust, why should it be that internally within the organization there should be trust?
As a customer, right? So everybody is smart enough, everybody can read between the lines. As a trust, comes from, of course, you need to build proven track record and all. But in the first level of the engagement, the first sign of trust comes from consistency. There should be consistency. अब वो consistency कुछ भी हो सकती है. Whatever you are portraying to be, that should be consistent. Your offering, consistent with your design, with your color palettes, with your copy, with the user journeys, with the data modelings, with the kind of your USPs, everything is a part of that entire user journey. The people who are speaking on calls, the people who are meeting the customer on the ground for maybe test drive or for maybe the evaluation or inspection of the car. So all kinds of engagement, not just the in-person engagement or not just the like engagement on the calls, but in any kind of digital interaction also, everything should be like super consistent, right? So वो trust का first sign वहीं से आता है. And it team members like who are enabling all that, right? So you cannot fake it, right? Maybe you will be able to fake it for maybe few weeks, maybe few months, few quarters, but on a sustainable basis, you can't fake it. And people are like super duper smart, right? If somebody is doing a test drive, then maybe that customer is spending 30 minutes or 60 minutes with our team member at the front line. If you are spending 30 minutes, 60 minutes with somebody, you will be able to read everything, body language, the vibe, the energy, and by the impression of that particular person at the front line, you will be able to, paint a picture about the company, what kind of organization it is.
I get it. So, this is, what we usually believe at an individual level, right? That don't try to be someone you're not inside.
Yeah.
You're saying at an organizational level,
Exactly.
This is important. How do you ensure this happens within the organization? How do you try to model for incentivizing trust, encouraging trust? Is there anything
It
that
requires lots of efforts, and it's not that just you have like one single bullet to solve for it. It requires a very comprehensive and very regular and very rigorous effort from everybody in the organization. So, but the basic principles are like being transparent, upfront, authentic with the team members internally, right? Insane level of transparency, taking good care of our people, being fair with our people, right? And keep reiterating what we are doing, why we are doing, and why, like how important this particular transaction is for the customer. And if you are able to help them do it the right way, then what kind of basically happiness and emotions we are going to unlock in that entire family, and getting some kind of satisfaction and fulfillment from that.
On the issue of trust, sometimes trust is also important when you're faced with a hard decision. And I want to refer to a hard decision that you've had to make recently, right? I think you had to do some layoffs, approximately 5% of your overall workforce in August this year. What are your reflections from that as a founder and as a CEO? Because I'm assuming that, sometimes, both of those are, as a CEO, you're responsible for the business and its survival and its sustainability.
Yeah.
Karthik, I want to switch to talking about, I think you've given us a great overview of Waycool. I want to switch to some conversations about you as a leader and as a founder. Things about decision making, feedback loops, etc. Right? But I want to start by referencing something that you said while we were like just getting ready for the show, and you said that, look, you've been traveling in the Northeast and North, and then now you're going somewhere else after this, and you said that's my job. And at that point, I want to ask you, you're the co-founder and CEO, and you told me my job is to be traveling into the field. Why is that? What do you see as your job as Waycool and as CEO, and why is being on the field your job?
The job of a leader is to take decisions that are based on facts. Now, facts are qualitative and quantitative. If you're sitting in your office and reading off spreadsheets or your various apps, you get quantitative information. You don't get the qualitative radar. And my job is to see around the corner. And this is applicable for my customers, my partners, and my employees. I have a huge problem with the org chart being shown how it is, right? And I've been vocal about it.
What does that mean?
You show the managing director on top,
right,
and
like
you have
the pyramid
a
kind of
going
structure,
down.
right? Like
It should be the
branching out.
other way, right? Your salespeople are out there on top. The guys who are running your warehouses, supporting the salespeople are immediately after. Then you bring in the cluster heads. The cluster head's job is to provide a guardrail and to support your salesperson. Your regional head's job is to support the cluster head. Your business unit head has to support all these guys. And I am the ultimate Sumaitangi, as we call it in Tamil, right?
What does that mean?
I am the load bearer for the entire organization.
Got it.
That is how it should be. What that means is that the organization, for it to be agile and responsive, has to shape itself around what's happening out there and how your people are forced to respond to it. Otherwise,
That's a fascinating analogy, I must tell you.
Right, and otherwise we prescribe what needs to be done, and that causes a lot of frustration, chaos, and angst in the front lines. We go through these periods once in a while. It's not, we are nowhere near perfect. So whenever I sense that we're going through one such period, I'm out in the field learning. That's really...
What follows? Because I can imagine that, you seem to be saying that we go through these periods, and I can visualize it in the course of the lifetime of an organization. There are ups and downs, right? Like, yes, the structure is working right now, and then you start to feel that, no, something is fraying at the edges. I need to go and figure it out. Yes. And you go and figure it out. Then when you come back, what happens? Do you end up then altering the structure?
Yes, we have to. Altering structure, altering policies, altering processes. To give you an example, some of the distribution partners that are further out, we realize that the credit limit that we set for them means that they have to get a truck of material, liquidate it, and pay us before we send the next truck, which means there's a discontinuity in product availability in the market. That discontinuity is exploited by their neighboring trader. So if you set your credit limit to be 2 trucks, because it takes a week for a truck to go from the south to wherever they are, and a week for them to liquidate the truck and pay us, then we've solved for product being available all the time in that market. So we just reset our credit limits accordingly. And 2 trucks is not as big a risk as 20 trucks, right? So that was one small insight that we learned. So the processes and structures have to undergo corrections based on the feedback from the market. Now, naturally, there should be a pushback from those who are mandated with safeguarding. So there should be a challenge from my finance team, and there is saying, are you taking too much risk? What if the guy says, okay, you've been doing, say, coconuts where your value is small, and suddenly he wants to do apple, and therefore 2 trucks of apple suddenly becomes 50 lakhs. Do I increase the credit limit to that? No. Then you come out with another solution saying, hey, maybe there is a cold storage in that town, and I put my guy in that town and store inventory over there to make sure that the inventory is available, but still it's on my books, and rather than going to a customer and therefore, getting diffused into the market.
While you were saying, the last few sentences, you used a very powerful word, regret, somewhere in the middle, right? If I were to just kind of ask you, what are your views generally on regret? What are they?
Look, I think first of the feeling with the word regret is a very bad one to begin with. It's not a great feeling to have regret. I think you can reflect, you can have learnings, but if it is regret, it's a strong word, which means that it evokes also because of a strong sentiment.
That's right.
That you genuinely, strongly believe that either that should have happened or that should not have happened when you look back. So that's sort of the first thing. I genuinely believe in this perspective of, and again, I think I read it in probably one of the recent newsletters, which was the risk regret framework. I truly believe in it. And this I actually read for the first time a few years back, but I have always had this inherently in myself, which is I ask myself that if I were to take this plunge, reverse, in the inverse of it. If I were not to take this plunge, would I regret it? If I would regret it, then I would consider taking this plunge, because it's a very strong statement, right? Which means that it truly makes complete sense to pursue it, but you're letting some barrier stop you from pursuing it. On the other hand, if it's just a good opportunity to have, but you're still not fully convinced, you'd say that, well, if I did not pursue this opportunity, I may feel bad,
But
I wouldn't regret it. So
in general, are you a kind of person who regrets missed opportunities?
very little, unless I believe that I did not do my job well. So
So you're also a glass half full kind of person. I mean, I guess most entrepreneurs and
it's
founders
relative.
are. You
It's
have
relative.
to also, right?
But I take my job very seriously. I take that I as a professional have to bring the best version to myself at work. I try to do that. So I of course have no regrets. But the toughest feeling I have is when I don't get an opportunity to solve something, and we fail. I'm that kind of person where I will be the first person to say that if there is a big challenge, I will jump in and fight shoulder to shoulder. And after that we fail, I feel like at least I put my hard work.
You said you have raised venture money, but not from venture capitalists. How much money have you raised, and who did you raise it from, and why is it not from venture capitalists?
Great question. So when I did my first round of capital raising, this was about 3 years after the company had started. And we raised it first from a family office. This was the Patni family, Amit and Arihant Patni, who actually kind of approached us because they saw what we were building in the wealth management space. And they had just had a liquidity event which had happened in 2011. And they realized that what we were trying to build was exactly what families needed. People who did not have a conflict of interest when they were advising families, people who looked at a more holistic view on wealth management, helping families as they transitioned out of their core business into something else. In fact, that's one of the big things that we see in Waterfield, that when you have a liquidity event, the core identity, and you exit a business, the identity of the family is then lost because they're so closely affiliated with the company that they have to rebuild a new identity for themselves. Much like entrepreneurship, actually, when you start afresh. So they came in 2014, and that was a relationship. Even today, Amit and Arihant continue on our board. And I found that what family offices brought was patient capital, because
So it's the same thing in the other direction.
It's long-term thinking the other way. And I thought, well, this is good because a wealth management business is going to take time to build, particularly if I'm trying to pioneer a new business model. It's going to take even longer. And here was somebody who was willing to look at supporting the journey of Waterfield, and really the values were the same. So that was the first round that happened. The second round that happened was in December 2019. And I said, well, really like the family offices. They understand what we're doing. And I said, well, let's raise a bit more capital. Let's raise it from more family offices. We did that again. And then, so the first round we raised was about, if I remember correctly, about 2 million when we raised the first time. The second time that we raised another 30 crores, which was primary capital. And the last round that I did in January was another 40 crores. So Waterfield, in terms of the funding that we've had, has actually been very reasonably capital efficient. We've built this in about 10 million over the last 12 years. And it's a great business. You can sleep well at night, and it's...
But you still didn't answer my question of why did you not raise it from venture capitalists?
Yes. So it's interesting. In December 2019, when we raised capital, there were a few private equity and venture funds that were kind of interested in what we were doing. But I kept speaking to them and I saying, look, I think we're quite early for you. And we're also, we're not raising large amounts of capital. But they liked what we were building. So at that time, there were 4 venture and private equity funds that actually funded Waterfield from their GP arms. Because I said, look, I'm not going to be able to give you an exit in a hurry. And if you do ask for the exit, then I don't want to destroy the nice relationship we have with each other. So they supported us, and there were 4 of them. There was TVS Capital, there was Zephyr, there was Gaja, and Chirate. And they all invested into Waterfield through their GP arms, which is really the vehicle through which they make their sponsor commitment to their funds. So I was very grateful for that support, because I think they've all always known that we wanted to build something different. It's going to take longer, but it was also trying to do the right thing. So very grateful for that support. So we did take money from them, but not through their fund, but from their GP arms.
What motivates you as a leader, professional, entrepreneur?
What motivates me is that I can see the change that's happening. I can see that we're providing net good in the world. Like every day, thousands of people walk through our doors and thousands of people walk out happy. And I'm motivated by knowing that we've made a difference in their lives. The future motivates me a lot. The future orientation helps because as much as things aren't as good as they could be, whatever systems I describe that we're building is not perfect. Our appointment systems still don't work perfectly. Our calls still don't get answered perfectly. Our app does crash from time to time. The blood test results do take time. Those counters and paper and all of that still exists. But we're making forward momentum, and I'm motivated by the fact that we're building towards something that will be better than anything the world has ever seen when it comes to how a healthcare experience should look like. And that's something that not too many people are focused on, not too many people are investing as much time and effort in doing. And when we get there, this can be a model for the whole world to copy. And then, it could lead to great things, because then people start taking care of their health better. Like, it is just astounding to me that most people don't spend as much time thinking about their health as they should. Even if it's 5 minutes a day, they're not even spending 5 minutes a day thinking about whether they should be really ordering that dessert, thinking about whether they've taken enough steps today, or choosing the stairs versus the lift. And these are simple interventions.
Small nudges help. I want to switch to, I think, the time during your excess years where you lost both of your 2 co-founders. What happened? I mean, I'm sure it must have been a stressful time for you as well. And take us through that.
I think we spread ourselves extremely thin, right? So I think what happened is KK had moved to the US. I was looking at Southeast Asia and Middle East. Ajay was running India. And until then, we would actually all stay in the same house till that point in time, till 2012. It was a house in BTM. And it was 2 minutes walk to another bungalow, which was our office, right? So...
were you all unmarried?
Yeah. We were all... I think we all got married in quick succession of like 2 months, right? So, and yeah, so we raised a lot of money. We got married. We had this nice secondary. So each of us also had now bought big cars, nice houses, all that stuff. And given you had money for the first time, there was also there was always ambition, but there was also now money to support that ambition, right? So KK moved to the US. He always wanted to move to the Valley. So he moved there. And suddenly what was a very coordinated team, I think kind of broke into this, and if you're in the Valley and if you have a co-founder in the Valley, God bless you. Because, it's exactly 12 hours away. The East Coast, I think, is still so much better because you get an extra 3-hour coverage. But otherwise, one of you is going to be groggy on that call very late in the night. Right? So I think... there was also this part in me where I think the money had got to both our heads in a lot of senses. Until then we were this company where, the the best, whoever had the best idea would win, right? So it was very merit than saying, is Anish saying it, or is KK saying it, or is someone else saying it, right? So, but I think with that money also came this pride of saying, we know what we're doing, right? To an extent. And I think, and the company scaled like crazy. We were about 100 people probably, 100, something on that. We scaled to 400 in about 18 months, right? So you just went berserk. You hired people from everywhere, good people. What also happens is, I think when you're hiring senior folks, right, if you don't really assimilate them well, they will naturally build a silo. And that's what ended up happening in the company, right? So we had these 5-6 big silos, engineering, professional services, HR, etc., etc. And we had 3 co-founders who were all in different parts of the world. Right. So as a net result, I don't think I think even my behavior would then end up being taking rash calls, like saying, look, we don't have the time to do this. Right. So very bully-like behavior. Right. So I think KK at least half of it he left for the fact that I think I was not workable with him at that point in time. Ajay, I think, was a different story. Ajay burnt out. Right. It's very hard to build a business in India. Right, and he was the guy who was shouldering it at that point in time, and he had taken all the load onto himself and let KK and me move out to greener pastures. Right, so I think he just kind of.
Were you still based out of India when you were looking?
I was based out of Bangalore. I mean, I think I'd moved to Singapore for a year. I couldn't fully finish the move. I'd got an EP and then had moved, but then we decided to come back. Right, so that meant. Yeah, I mean, it was a very hard time, because KK then one day came to me and said, look, I don't think I can work here anymore. It was just until then I was clueless that something like this is going to happen, right? So it was just, and he felt that I'd kind of become a bully. And I had not realized, and I was shocked when he said that. Obviously, your first response to it is defense, right? I mean, you just defend saying, no, that's not true. How can you say that? You also said this, all that stuff, right? Sab hoga, right? So, and then, luckily one of Venkat was on the board. Venkat is one of the founders of Daksh. And he was also our first angel and first board member. And he's still a board member. So he's really seen the company over the years. He sat me down and said, look, why don't you get a coach? You're 28. It's not like you have, I mean, how many 28-year-olds have 400 member teams and have built businesses? So get a coach.
What's your philosophy about feedback? Both giving feedback as well as receiving feedback.
It should be very frequent, continuous. It should be 50-50. You have to build, unless I think that you have to ask more than you have to give. At least it has helped me. I don't know if it has helped Udan or not. I do fundamentally.
By that means solicit more feedback for yourself than you're giving.
I mean, ask more people कि यार क्या चल रहा है, कैसा लग रहा है, क्या हुआ, do you think I did well or not, इसमें क्या issue है, what worked, what didn't work. I believe, and it should be more sort of informal and more frequent than more formal. That's kind of my style.
What's the best time to give you feedback on something?
कभी भी, I guess. I think people do that. People will say कि यार विजी आप उस मीटिंग में क्या बोल रहे थे, मतलब क्यों आप ये ड्रामा कर रहे हो, you could have said this way, मेरी टीम वाले को ऐसे लग गया.
All right. On that question, what's the one line that your team or organization dreads hearing from you after a meeting or in a meeting?
Oh, I think they all likely accept that whatever needs to be done, I'll ask for 2x of that in half the time. So
as of yesterday. And
so they're kind of in that zone of always they're always a little bit, people are trying different ways of what statement I should say without committing something, and then that kind of thing.
But isn't that hard? Because then, implicitly, this is a pattern that exists with most CEOs and founders as well, that there's a certain amount of padding because you know that you'll be pushed. So it's in some ways it's like the bargaining thing where like the shopkeeper knows that like, this is the price, but I'm going to like inflate it so that I have space to reduce it.
I think it depends on the culture of the company and the people on the table. I think to me, if the people on the table, and I've seen this in Flipkart as well as in Udaan, by the way, these are the two I've been part of. People on the table, 9 out of the 10 times, and 9 out of the 10 people own the company more than the founder. Once that mechanics happen, then this doesn't happen. So I think that's an important mechanics. Like they should be like, okay, I'm here because of my belief in Udaan, not because I have a relationship with VG.
When you were starting Fresh Desk back then, did you estimate the human elements? Because a lot of what you said is creating a work environment, helping people grow, etc. Like, did you have that sense when you were starting out?
See, I think definitely yes, because a lot of people who joined Freshworks, there were two kinds of people, right? Most of the managers, leaders were people who had worked with me. I had spent 10 years in Chennai, right? And there were people who have worked with me who I knew how they work and they knew how I manage. Being a manager who always have treated them fairly, so that helped. So the network of people who had quit and gone on to other companies, some of them had gone to service companies, some of them had gone to Yahoo and VMware. People started reaching out and wanting to come back when they knew that I'm starting up, right? So that created what I call as the anchors. The leaders are the anchors, and we built small teams around every anchor. So then we went and hired directly freshers. So we did not hire a lot of laterals. If you look at the first few years, even if we hired people, it was through referrals from the anchors. So very few like strangers were hired. So we tapped onto networks that we knew. We went to freshers, and then we went to referrals from our employees. So that is how the initial core grew. So which means the fact that I've been a fair manager and had invested in those relationships, that paid off. And when you are working with that as the ethos and the DNA, I think these were all phenomenal people, and we all enjoyed. And at the end of the day, there's also another important lesson, right? If you're winning, the mode is very different. So Freshworks, the product, we all came together to craft a great product. We had the right team in place. Like we had the right values. Like the designer who used to work for me, went to Yahoo. He became an even better designer with training on Yahoo, and then came to us. And so we have a great designer, right? Like we have people like that who brought the right skill set. And then when you're winning, it's like I would always say that famous India-Pakistan match that happened in Sharjah or Dubai, where Virat Kohli hit 28 runs of 8 balls or something, right? And then the last 2 balls, there was a no ball bowled. And so we were supposed to lose that match because for 40, I think it was a 2020, 38.4 or 38.2 overs, Pakistan played well. The last 8 balls, we played well and we won. We forgot, nobody talked about the other 38 overs where we played badly. And I'm sure even on the other side, everybody would have focused on those last 2 balls. So the management lesson there is, if you win, people forget the inefficiencies and focus on celebrating. If you lose, people forget the hard work and start pointing fingers. So it's very, very important for a leader to ensure that, hey, the team is winning. So, and I think at Freshworks, we could say that every year felt like a great win. It's not like we didn't have our problems, we didn't have our challenges, we had all of that. But we were winning. And so we got ready for the next match and the next match and the next match. So that was important. So in hindsight, it will look like everything was perfect. Everything was never perfect. Every year we had challenges. Every year we had people issues. Every year we had our struggles. But the product was great. Customers loved our product. We were winning, and that's what mattered.
What is it that you believe in that few people would agree with?
It's a difficult question. I think it's amongst entrepreneurs, there is a strong belief that you need to take shortcuts, and don't pay as much attention on governance. And it's changing, but I think on governance it's very important that you practice the highest standards of governance in the organization, because if you are taking shortcuts, then you are creating a culture of taking shortcuts to meet certain challenges, and that will haunt you as you grow. So many entrepreneurs, especially in early stages, they don't pay as much attention on governance. Number two, in the area of talent, many entrepreneurs, to them HR is a function which is much, much lower hierarchy compared to some other functions like manufacturing or marketing. To me, HR is there on par with any other function, because ultimately it's the talent and the culture which will make you win the marketplace, But people don't realize that this is one area they need to work upon. There is a war for talent, and that war for talent has to be dealt as seriously as war for market share or growth.
Have you seen this attitude changing when it comes to startups? Because increasingly younger startups, you see founders taking on the role of handling people and culture, etc.
Yeah.
Compared to older organizations where it's seen as a function, where HR is responsible for talent and attrition, etc.
To some extent, I don't know. I don't have that much detailed knowledge about the startups and how is it different. But I reckon that because they have built a new business based on some people and people's strengths, so I reckon they will be paying much more attention to relatively older organizations.
I want to switch way back, 20 years, maybe even more, when you were doing your undergraduate studies at the University of Michigan. You won a competition to design a solar car along with the team. And then you were, of course, sponsored by General Motors to race this car at the World Solar Challenge. You came third. They say, and I think I have this photo of you next to a poster which says, "Well done, Chetan, hobby to reality." And there's a younger you posing in front of it. Winner GM Sunrace 1990. One of the things that they talk about entrepreneurship is that find something that you're passionate about, and then you'll never have to work another day in your life. Was this something that you were always passionate about, and have you just essentially not let go of it?
So I was extremely passionate about building stuff, built radios when I was probably 10 years old.
I have photos of you, a 9-year-old you building a model aircraft.
Yes, so I enjoyed building stuff, cars, planes, all of that, flying them and racing them. I was probably very much into racing and probably, combustion engines, to be honest with you, when I was in college. And I think this experience of racing a solar car and crossing the Australian outback, without any oil, was sort of an eye-opener. Wow, I can't believe you can do this, right? And this confidence that you were 20-year-olds and you could beat OEMs and come third after Honda, right? None of us had any experience. So this was a space that was new. It was a space that you went back to basic principles. You could think differently. You could innovate and the impact was very high. And,
just for us, what was the distance that
we did 3,200 kilometers from Darwin to Adelaide. Right?
And what are the broad rules?
So you basically start off at Darwin, right? You have a qualifying and based on your qualifying, you start at that level.
The vehicle itself, what can you do?
So they had a certain amount of the dimensions of the vehicle, maximum dimensions.
Yeah.
The maximum amount of solar panels you could put on it, and the maximum amount. You always need a bit battery, right? Because you're not charging it using mains. You're only charging using solar. A maximum amount of battery you could use. That's it. The rest of it, you could innovate completely. So this was pretty high tech, aluminum space frame, aluminum space frames,
So you're trying
carbon
to solve
Kevlar
for
bodies,
aerodynamics,
lightness,
efficiency of the solar cells,
right.
battery.
We had PhDs helping us. We had supercomputers from IBM, and we had PhDs helping us. We had 2 satellites that could download weather data, and we would analyze it to understand weather patterns, because the only variable was weather, right? How much sun energy would I get today? And
so you're predicting how to drive based
how would I
on-
drive, and what would my cloud pattern, and how do I go between that, and then running simulations at 5 a.m. before you started the race, right? Wherever you stopped during the day, you camped, and you had a person who's with you to make sure everything was charged. So the team went a little ahead and camped in the desert, and we would park the car and stay the night there. Early morning, you had to start at 8 again, and they had each team had someone who managed the process to make sure everything was kosher, and you raced. So you were just sort of didn't know where others were. You of course had someone go up and down to see, but you were on this 3,200 kilometer thing where sometimes the distance between gas stations was 300 kilometers, right? So it's open road.
I want to ask you about long form communication for meetings. Specifically, how do you ensure that when someone puts in a lot of hard work into writing a long form piece about a project that they're planning or like some initiative that they're planning, and if it's being sent out to a group, how do you ensure that the group actually reads it and values it, and it doesn't end up becoming a scenario where the person who wrote the long form feels that, look, I wrote it, but I don't think anyone took it seriously enough?
Yeah, see, I used to work at McKinsey where there was a saying that, we were changing the world one PowerPoint slide at a time. So it's like that hardcore. But the one thing I realized that the problem with PowerPoints is that its biggest use is to make the presenter look good. And as a result, all the charts on PowerPoints are, upward sloping towards the right. And, you just bring in the good news after good news after good news. Because you're presenting, you have to look good. Secondly, you're saying something and then someone asks a question which you're already covering 3 slides down the line. So these are all issues with PowerPoint presentation. So fundamentally, long form actually meetings become sharper. Number one, and everybody realizes that.
So what happens? So someone writes in a typical meeting at Rebel.
Someone would write, prepare. Either it's a review, a business review, or a new project, as you said, or PR FAQ, which is a new product, is like new brand is going to be launched.
This is the Amazon PR FAQ.
Amazon PR FAQ, etc. And there is no sending out the document and expecting people to read. So the meeting starts with the document. So people read for the first 10-15 minutes. So there's this, absolute silence for like 10-15 minutes. People are actually reading the document. And then there's sections. So one is like what's going well, what's not, depending on what type. And then there is leadership debates, issues. If you don't read those, then, there are leaders in the room who have to discuss, debate based on that. If you don't read, you won't be participating in that meeting. Secondly, decisions should be taken on that document, and that might affect you as a leader. You may be expected, like leadership support required. There is a section where you're asking for support from leaders around the table or functions around the table. If you don't read it, you don't know what has been asked from you, and it gets passed, and then it will come on you to deliver that part of the project. So people have to read it. Otherwise, there is somewhere in the system it will get caught. And then secondly, it is more efficient for people who are reading because meetings become shorter, sharper, around the most important, decision points. So it saves everybody's time, and nobody wants to have long meetings and all of that. So it's in everybody's benefit. And the guy or the girl who is writing has to put forward the thinking behind, and also it is not a make me look good kind of a presentation. So if something is not going well, it is written there, and all of that. So there's a lot of benefits, like the right things gets discussed, it's sharper, people around the table who are expected to deliver something get to know what I'm expected to deliver. If something needs to be discussed, it will get discussed. So lots of benefits. But it took us a year, 5-6 years back when we started this to actually go through some of these cycles. And then we used to have a feedback loop that how was the document, was it action oriented, and a couple of things. And people started rating those. And, there was some coaching, etc. that was given. So now it is like second nature, after so many years, writing a good document and reading that document, having that discussion. And
Is this something which is just done at a senior leadership level, or it percolates across various levels of the organization?
All meetings are done through, there is some WBR, etc., which is around metrics, etc.
Which is around metrics.
I would say 90% would be written material.
And how easy is it when new people join the organization to be able to develop this key skill of being able to communicate their thoughts well in a structured manner through a narrative form, which, by the way, is not a common skill?
Yeah, it's not a common skill. But the thing is, now that we have been doing it, at any point in time in a meeting, it's not that every day some new person is coming and doing it. So as a ratio of number of new people trying to do it is small now.
And they learn quickly. Alok, you're both a first generation entrepreneur as well as a serial entrepreneur. If I'm not mistaken, you're the first in your family to become an entrepreneur.
In the startup sense, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, you're a serial entrepreneur as well. 3 probably if I count Kenan as well, because you set up Kenan in India.
That's correct.
Right. So there's a very interesting, I think, mix that we see in you. So your first startup was Jobs Ahead.
That's right.
And you sold that to Monster.com. Where did that come about? And,
Jobs Ahead was an interesting story. There is a friend of mine, Puneet. Both of us went to IIT together. And I decided, I think halfway through my IIT stint, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Right.
And do you remember what the trigger or nudge or inspiration was?
No, very clearly. So I interned at a company called CMR Design Automation in Greater Kailash. And there was another IT alumnus, Chandra. I recently reconnected with him. So he was running his own company in his basement, top quality work. And I loved the lifestyle. He could walk down and work in the basement when he wanted, and he could walk up for lunch. So I said, this is what I want to be. So it was a very, very 19-year-old view to what you want to be, but that stuck. And in 1997, 98, I was beginning to get anxious about I need to do this now. And I was in Bangalore. I was living in Bangalore at that point, and Puneet happened to come there, and he said, hey, I'm looking at starting an internet business, and we should chat. And literally he came over to my house in the evening. We sat through the night, and somewhere during the course of that night, we said, yes, we're going to do this. Interestingly enough, we didn't have the idea kind of baked in at that time. We just said we're going to do a startup in the internet space, right? I came back to Delhi then. And then we kind of first put our head to what the idea should be. We launched a business called Zip Ahead in November of 1999.
Was that also in the careers space?
So that had 4 services for all Indians. All Indians were all 1 million Indians at that time. And that had 4 channels: careers, fashion, e-commerce, we were selling books, and dating. So we said we're covering all the needs of the Indian audience. And then as soon as we launched, within literally the next 15 days, the users told us that they were only interested in careers. So 85% of our traffic was going to the careers page. So then subsequently over the next couple of months, we just pulled out the careers piece, branded that Jobs Ahead, and focused all our resources on that. So that was, in some sense, the idea emerged as we executed. But yeah, that was the first one.
You did that for about 6 years before you sold it?
99 to 2005, yeah.
And then you became a VC.
Yeah, that was quite accidental. So once I sold Jobs Ahead, I was looking to start my next business. I had a couple of ideas on the table. And again, I went to meet another friend, Rahul Basin, who was at Bearings. I still remember, I think it was the 13th of September, Friday and Saturday. And he said, hey, while you're looking for your next business idea, Bearings has classically been in growth equity. He said, we want to build venture as an asset class, and why don't you come join, help us build venture while you're looking for the next idea, right? And Monday I was at Bearings, trying to build venture cap for them. Unfortunately, that relationship did not, land up being a long one. But around February timeframe, Kenan was then looking at setting up shop in India. That discussion materialized. So end of March, I joined Kenan to set up their presence in India.
And you did that for close to 10 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 6 to 15, so 9 years.
Yeah. And then, of course, you left Kenan. Kenan got sold.
Kenan
got acquired by JP Morgan or its assets?
So the first thing that happened was, Kenan was investing in US, India, and Israel through a common global fund. And Kenan wanted to focus that fund on the US market. So essentially, there was a choice to say, do we want to raise another fund or we don't, right? So for our partner in Israel, for example, said he'll raise a separate fund, Kenan Israel, and went down that route. In India, me and my other colleagues here all felt like that's not what we wanted to do. I wanted to be back in entrepreneurship. Rahul Khanna, who was my other partner, wanted to set up a broader financial services play. And to that extent, we said we don't want to do that. And then we had a portfolio of companies. So the next task for me then was to make sure that we land the portfolio right. And in that process, we ended up selling it to JP Morgan. So the decision to sell to JP Morgan was an outcome of the other decisions.
After nearly a decade stint as a VC, how was your second stint? How did it influence your second stint as an entrepreneur? Did it?
I think in some ways it did. I think the notion of, what creates value in a company was kind of better baked in my mind. And that's probably the reason I wanted to get into a second operational stint. When we started the first company, it was a dot-com boom. The notion of what creates value in a company, it was very different. We were younger. I don't think we had an understanding of what happens there. I think the second piece that was very clear in my mind was the time it takes to build a company, right?
What is that, if I may ask you? If you had to put down a range of years.
I think at the lower end, it's 10 years. And then, depends on how much you want to kind of ride the compounding, right? But I'm hard-pressed to come up with companies that got built to a reasonable scale in less than 10 years in the Indian market, right? So really, when we started this company, both me, my co-founder, both of us started with the view that, there's kind of no end timeline that we are putting to this. In the sense that we will build it and we'll continue to build it and we'll see how it goes. But really, if it works and if we continue to enjoy what we are doing, we are here indefinitely. So I think that mindset was certainly different from when I started my first company.
Your dad was a doctor. How did you end up in the hospitality sector? And more importantly, why is it that you said that you wanted to be an entrepreneur since 2007? What were the steps that ended up with you entering the hospitality sector and then wanting to be an entrepreneur?
It's a great answer. It's a great question and I'll answer it. So I gave every single medical entrance exam, Rohin. I cracked nothing. I thought my rank in AIIMS was 1,95,000. I think only 1,95,000 people only sat for the exam. Okay. So I never cracked any medical exam. And now we've signed up a hotel with a gentleman who owns a 1,000 bed hospital with a medical college. And I told him the same. I said, I always wanted to be a doctor. He says, never too late. Yeah. So, but just to give an example, so I came into hotels accidentally. I always at home also, there was a lot of love for food. And there was always discussion on the table about food. My father was a doctor, but he used to cook every day. He used to love cooking. The first time I would meet Chef Sanjeev Kapoor, I'd tell him that my father was a big fan. And he says, really? So it was all about food at home. So I thought that, I just gave the exam as a fluke and I got through and I Actually, I remember because I gave it as a fluke. My first choice was Srinagar. They asked you which part of national, they had 16 colleges. Where do you want to go? First was Srinagar because it's cold. It's hot in Delhi when you give the entrance exam in May. And the second was Bangalore because great weather. And the third was Delhi. So in my interview, they said, Mr. Chopra, why do you want to go to Srinagar? I said, because it's nice, it's great weather. He's saying, we'd like to inform you that the college has been closed due to terror activities. So we're really disappointed that you cannot go to Srinagar, but we'll send you to Bangalore. So I went for hotel management to Bangalore for my first year, actually.
And where did the seed for entrepreneurship come from?
Always wanted it. Always wanted it. Always wanted to create something on my own. It was all just there. It always was there.
Was that during your long career at Oberoi, you left Oberoi Group twice, I think. Once when
once,
you went.
No, just once.
That was Hyatt,
Taj,
and then you came back.
Yeah.
Was there something about would you want to tell us about going back to, because not many organizations and employers are comfortable, or employees are comfortable going back to where they left. But it also says a lot about...
So Oberoi has a great culture and a lot of our people. So the first preference, even when I was president, I would give to people who had quit Oberoi and would wanted to come back because they understand the DNA, the culture. I think a lot of amazing work has been done by the Oberoi School, which is the management school, very coveted, very tough to get in. 10,000 people apply, 20 get in. Very tough. Yeah, I was a alumni of that school. So if we know your badge, and so even if I today meet you and you say that, I also went to OCLD, which is the school, and I was a batch of 2003, I would definitely have an affinity towards you. So there's a lot of, so you're always welcome back. I was actually called back. We were doing the Trident in Gurgaon, which finally would become the most successful hotel ever in India, like ever. It kind of paid back its entire investment in 2 years, 5 months. And that would actually leapfrog my career in a very significant way. But I was called back from Taj to say, why did you leave? I was a topper and I'd left. And the reason to leave Oberoi was, again, they had a batch system. So, your restless point comes in. I was like, why should I conform to this? I didn't join the government. Why should a person of a senior batch take me over? Why isn't this on the basis of competency? So that's why I left, really. And India was opening up. Grand Hyatt was opening the first hotel in India. So that was there. Then my bosses from Oberoi quit and went to the Taj because Taj was undergoing a transformation. And Ajit Kerkar had just been taken out by Mr. Tata, and Mr. Krishna Kumar had come in. He was appointing a full team. So my ex-team from Oberoi, my guys who trained me at the management school, moved to Taj, and they picked me up from the Hyatt to go to the Taj. And then I got a call back from Mr. Oberoi himself. He said, come back. So I came back.
Is that one of your philosophies at Postcard also? You're still young, so I'm assuming that chain still hasn't started to play, which is people leaving and then wanting to come back. But is that something that
It's already happened. It's happened in 3-4 cases. And again, most of them are welcome. Most of them are welcome back. Because you see, I believe people should be given the freedom to choose and decide what they want to do. So definitely once you can come back. I'm not sure about the second time. Yeah, but once, yeah.